I've never told the story to anyone, and in fact, I'm not going to provide our real names just to make sure nobody can connect the dots here. For the sake of the story, my name is Sarah and my boyfriend's name is David. He and I live in Ontario, Canada. This part is true, as is the rest of the story. This happened to us over 10 years ago, but for me it feels like yesterday. We decided to take a camping trip to a remote area of Manitoba to get away from people for a few days. We do a lot of camping and always try to discover and explore new places. It was April, and the weather that spring was warmer than normal by Manitoba standards anyway, reaching 15 degrees Celsius during the day and 5 degrees at night, so it seemed like the perfect new spot for our little adventure. There are a few ordained camping spots available through the Parks and Protected Spaces page of the government website, but that wasn't for us. We prefer to go off the path and explore areas where nobody else is likely to be there. So once we arrived at our spot, we set off on a half-day hike through the forest in search for the perfect place to set up camp. Along the way, we spotted some of the native inhabitants, a few moose, one fox, and a family of white-tailed deer. The nature was truly stunning. By the time we got to our campsite, it was already time to settle down for our first night, and it became clear that the evening weather was not quite as warm as had been reported. After making a fire, we sat around to keep ourselves warm and eventually retired to our tent and bundled ourselves up in our sleeping bags. It was very quiet outside, but for the sound of the wind slicing through the trees, and David and I clung onto each other, seeking solace and warmth in the midst of the now bone-chilling cold. As we laid there, we made some small talk until we both finally fell asleep. But we weren't sleeping long before we both were jolted awake by a blood-curdling howl. It was so loud and sounded so close to us. "What was that?" I asked as David quickly jumped out of his sleeping bag, grabbed his pistol and flashlight, and exited the tent without saying a word. I followed behind him, and we both started scanning the surroundings for any sign of the source of that sound. As the beam of the flashlight swirled through the forest, we suddenly came to an area where we saw one of the trees swaying side to side. Then came another growl. Anticipating that perhaps we were being stalked by a black bear, David fired a couple shots and yelled, "Go away, bear!" expecting to see the animal dart off into the forest. But what we saw instead made no sense. Out from behind the tree came a large moose-like animal with huge, elaborate horns. But it was reared up on its hind legs, and it continued to growl in our direction, as if to tell us to get the hell out of its territory. It was dark and is far enough away that we couldn't see its features clearly, but it looked nothing like any moose that we had ever seen, and we had seen plenty of them. David whispered to me that we needed to grab our stuff and leave immediately, and he began to slowly back up, but made sure to keep the light focused on our unwelcoming friend. While he stood and faced down this animal, I grabbed our backpacks and all our essentials and made ready for our retreat. We began slowly walking backwards until the animal was no longer visible. At that point, we turned around and quickly made our way back the way we came. Only now, we had only the moonlight and flashlight to show us the way. By the time we made it to the car, we were totally exhausted and the sun was rising. It was on the drive home that we finally had the time to have a rational conversation about what we saw earlier that morning. I started doing some Google searches about strange animals that might live in that particular area. And while no pictures of animals came up that resembled what we saw, I came across a creature of folklore called a Wendigo. There were no actual pictures of one, but the drawings that were based on eyewitness descriptions were uncanny. There was no doubt in my mind that we encountered a Wendigo in the forest. When I read about this creature, I was horrified. It is said to be an evil supernatural being with a foul stench, and it has a desire to cannibalize human beings. It went on to say that an unseasonable chill might precede its arrival. It checked all the boxes, and while David and I know what we saw, we agreed never to tell anyone we know about the encounter. As the sun began its ascent over the Louisiana bayou where I live, I set out to tend to my herd of cows grazing by the riverbank. It was a morning like any other on my sugarcane farm, and the bayou was calm and tranquil as it always was at that hour. But as I approached the herd, I started to get a sense that something was very, very wrong. Doing a head count, my heart sank as I discovered that one of my cows was missing. I started running around frantically looking for her. Even the loss of a single animal could have a significant impact on my livelihood. As I examined the area, I noticed that the vegetation and earth was disturbed in a spot that was about 20 feet from the river. Determined to find her or any trace of what might have happened to her, I grabbed my hunting rifle and went looking for what I suspected was a rogue large gator. There are plenty of gators in these waters, but most are not very big, and I have never had one attempt to attack my livestock. I ventured into the bayou with my flat-bottomed boat and went up and down the shoreline searching for any sign of her. If there was a cattle-eating gator out there, I needed to hunt it down before it came back and grabbed another one. And after an entire day of searching, I didn't find anything. And as dusk approached, I became aware that I only had about 1 hour left of daylight. Now, I don't normally get spooked out here, but this evening I found myself on edge and every snap of a twig made me a little jumpy. As I rounded the last bank before I planned to turn around, I saw some movement in the way of dark shadows on the land in between the bald cypress trees. It certainly wasn't a gator, but it was something large. Rather than approach, I stopped the boat and stared through the trees waiting for more movement. It didn't take long before I saw a head of a large dog peek out from the vegetation. It had huge red eyes and a head at least twice the size of a wolf. Instinctively, I screamed at it and fired a shot in the air. In response, the creature jumped out and ran away from the riverbank and further into the swamp, blending seamlessly within its surroundings, as it let out a high-pitched howl that pierced my eardrums and seemed to echo through the entire bayou. My heart skipped a beat and my blood ran cold when I saw that the creature had 2 legs just like a human. That could only mean one thing. I have just seen a Rougarou. For those who aren't familiar, the Rougarou is a creature that is part of lore here in Louisiana. It's half wolf, half man, and said to prowl the swamps around here. Some people swear that the creature exists, while others dismiss it as a story parents tell their kids to scare them into obedience. I know where I stand on this question now, though. Still a little stunned, I turned the boat around and headed back, with some daylight left to spare. As I meandered home, I tried to recall all the tales of the Rougarou that I had heard as a child. I believed the stories back then, but now it took on a deeper meaning for me. It was not merely a creature to be feared, but a symbol of the untamed wilderness, a reminder of the hidden wonders that lie beyond our understanding. I returned to my farm, knowing that my missing cow was likely gone forever. Yet I carried with me the memory of that brief encounter with the Rougarou. It served as a reminder of the delicate balance between nature and humanity, and the importance of respecting the untamed beauty of the bayou. In the next few days, I shared my story with anyone who would listen, always with a sense of awe and reverence. I can tell you that some people believe me, but most did not, even if they pretended to, but I don't care. Thank you for letting me tell you my story. My name is Andre, and I own a small farm in Romania. My English is very poor, so I'm having a friend of mine transcribe the story for me. I hope the meaning of the words interpret correctly. I apologize if some do not. One evening, while the sun was starting to set, I began to venture back from the fields to end my day. This time of year, the sun always seems to set so fast and darkness comes quickly. By the time I got near the barn, on my way to the house, it was already dark, but I was still able to see because my eyes had adjusted. As I passed it, the barn door, usually tightly secured because of the animals inside, was now wide open. Confused by this, and my senses heightened, I peered inside, but I could not see anything, although some of the animals were acting a little restless. Thinking that perhaps a critter or predator went in there to harass the animals, I went to the house to get a lantern so I can see better inside. On the way out, I grabbed a shotgun just as a precaution. This time, as I approached the barn door, I could hear the livestock acting more aggressively and with agitation to something inside the barn. I picked up the pace, shotgun in my right hand and lantern in my left, and ran through the barn door and to the back of the barn where the commotion was. What I saw, I find hard to explain, even today. It looked like a huge wolf, but it had 2 legs and 2 arms like a human. Its eyes were glowing red and it had sharp teeth, which were now red from biting into my livestock. I took a shot at it and must have missed because it proceeded to run and jump onto the 2nd story of the loft in the barn. Concerned that it might try to escape through the double windows from the 2nd floor, I took another shot at it from underneath. I can hear it moving around up there, so I knew that I probably missed my mark again, but I was out of ammunition since the shotgun only contained 2 shells. Now concerned for my own safety, I ran back to the house to get more ammunition. I was determined to get this thing because I was afraid it would keep coming back for my livestock. Back at the house, I grabbed a whole box of shells and loaded the gun as I ran back to the barn. As I approached this time, I could smell something burning, and when I got to the door, I could see that the inside of the barn was on fire. That thing must have pushed over my lantern and onto the hay. I was able to lead the animals out safely as the barn continued to burn down to the ground. All I could do was sit and watch while the fire burned most of the structure. But when the radiance faded, it was clear that the creature had made it out sometime before or during the fire. As the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon, and with the help of a few good neighbors, we began the task of cleaning up and rebuilding what was destroyed. News of the horrifying creature spread through the neighboring villages, leaving a lingering sense of awe and unease, especially for the other farmers who had livestock of their own. But I can tell you that some people were skeptical of my description of the event and questioned if such a creature could exist. Months turned into years, and the creature never showed again, and the memory of that terrifying encounter began to fade. Life on the farm regained a semblance of normalcy, but deep within me, the knowledge of the unknown lingered, forever altering my perception of the world.